A number of months ago, I did a piece with regards to my take on education reform and how it was actually being destroyed from within by this drive for research-based practices and techniques. And at the time, I had said that realize that research is only done by those people who are paying for it for the purposes of reinforcing their ends. The old idea, if you take their money, you got to play by their rules. Well, recently, the emphasis has now been on healthcare reform. And lo and behold, research is sticking out its ugly head again. That being that we're going to reform healthcare by restricting ourselves to only those tests and those practices which actually show results. This gets us into a dangerous area. Because what do you consider to be adequate results and not adequate results? They're trying to cut down on costs by cutting down on unnecessary testing, for example. But as I said earlier, some of that testing is defensive in nature. Because whereas we're trying to get the best health care possible, there are lawyers out there trying to get the best settlements possible. And it puts doctors in the dubious position of either cutting costs in order to save the consumers or adding to their costs so that they don't get sued later. But it also introduces another problem, not just in terms of the medical testing, but even in the medical procedures themselves. Healthcare, like education, is not a one-size-fits-all proposition. There's so many different complexities in both that if you try to prescribe one particular pattern or one particular practice, you may not necessarily choose the one that's most appropriate. Now, they're going to say that, well, we're going to leave it all up to the doctors. But part of healthcare reform also deals with paying for it. One of the biggest mantras in this healthcare reform is that it's too expensive. And they're trying to cut costs. Medical testing is not the only place they're going to cut costs. At some point, they're also going to cut costs in terms of the actual medical practices and procedures. And that's the frightening part. What if that particular procedure that they view as being impractical because it only saves half the people's lives and lets the other half die? What if that's the one that saves you? Once you get bureaucrats in there and actuaries and bean counters, we now start really understanding the value of human life. What if that procedure that's only 10% effective, what if you're part of that 10%? It takes away from doctors the opportunity to use what they view as being best. It leaves it to bureaucrats to decide, oh, this will work and this will not work. I'd leave that up to the doctors. Because what do bureaucrats know? They're not the ones that are actually treating you. They're not the ones that are actually seeing you. But it all comes down, again, to research. Where does the research, and more importantly, who paid for it, come into play? There's been various little scandals over the past few years, small ones that didn't get a lot of press, where you had drug companies doing their own research and bamboozling doctors into believing that their stuff was more effective. Now we're looking at the other side. What if the people doing the research are now underestimating effectiveness solely for the purposes of cutting costs? No, healthcare reform is much more complicated than that. And leave it to the government to find new and innovative ways to screw it up.